So, how we doing? Doing good, all right. That's good. I've had a little bit more caffeine since 20 minutes ago at the beginning of the service, and so I'm doing a little bit better than I was at the beginning of the service as well. But it is great to see everybody this morning. I'm glad to be here. Out of curiosity, don't embarrass me. Are you glad to be here? Okay, you can embarrass me if you want to, I guess, but you know what I mean, right? But I'm glad to be here. You're glad to be here. I'm glad to be back at it together. I'm especially excited because this morning is not a normal service. It is the fourth Sunday of the month, which means that this morning is what we call one of our Ask Me Anything services. Now, if you are new to Mount Zion or you haven't experienced one of our Ask Me Anything services up to this point, what's happening is that we all have questions about God, questions about the Bible, questions about Christianity that we have always wondered about, but that no one has ever taken the time to explain to us. And we need a church that welcomes our questions when we experience that, don't we? There is nothing in the world worse than having questions about your faith, but being in a church that has a problem with you having questions about your faith, isn't there? Ever gone to a spiritual leader of some sort and asked about something that just has never made sense to you, and they say, hey, you just need to not question God. You just need to have faith like a child. That person has never met a child. Have you ever answered a question that a child has asked you and then them not just been like, okay, well, wait, what about this? Oh, wait, what about this? 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 And then like 4 hours later, you finally satisfy them. And it's not actually that they're satisfied. It's just that they eventually passed out because it's 2 a.m. now, right? We need to be a church that welcomes your questions. And because that is true, all throughout the month, we have a question box sitting in our entryway. And every single week, you can go to that question box. You can write down your toughest questions about the faith. And on the fourth Sunday of most months, we take the questions that we've had put into the box more often than any other. We drop absolutely everything and devote our entire teaching time to answering as many of the questions as we can. And I'm so excited to jump back into that together for this month because we have an extremely interesting question on the table for this month. I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm just going to dive straight in and start working through this month's one big question, and you'll see why in just a moment. Sound good? Are you ready? Here we go. Here's the one big question that just outpaced every single other question for this month. Is it always a sin to lie? Or is it okay to lie sometimes? We had this question, by this point, more than twice as much as any other question when we counted everything up. I don't know, was there like a Christian TikTok about whether you can lie or something like that that went viral, that got it on every, I don't know. But one person put it this way. They said, sometimes I find myself lying to other people about whether I'm free today because I just don't have the energy to do anything or be with people, even though I technically don't have anything scheduled. Is it a sin for me to lie to them about that and other stuff like it? I love how specific that is. Another person put it this way. They said, if lying is a sin, is it sinful to lie in order to help somebody else or protect somebody? What are you supposed to do if telling the truth will hurt somebody else? Okay, we got a philosopher. I like it. Another person wrote, I have heard that in the Ten Commandments, when it says, thou shalt not bear false witness, it is not talking about lying. It's talking about falsely accusing people of crimes they didn't commit or slandering them in some way to hurt their reputation. Is that true? Or does bearing false witness mean that we should never, ever lie? We can read off different versions of this all day because we got so many different versions of it, but they all basically boil down to this one big thing. Is it always a sin to lie, or is it okay to lie sometimes? That is a fantastic question, which is why you guys asked it, right? But in order to answer this question in a clear and biblical way, we need to rewind the videotape a little bit. We need to set the stage a little bit. Before anything else, we need to lay a handful of things out that'll make it easier for us to wrestle with both parts of this question. So, let's do that. Before anything else, we need to make one thing extremely clear. We were not created to lie. We can't understand any of the rest of what we're going to talk about this morning if we don't understand this one big thing. God created you and I and everybody else to tell the truth. God created you and me and every other person who has ever existed to be like Him, in a sense. God created every single person who has ever existed to reflect His character and His nature. We exist as humans, above all other things, to reflect God's goodness and to reflect God's glory. Know what I'm talking about? He created us to be like Him. And with that in mind, there is one thing about this whole question that becomes really simple, and that's this. Deception does not reflect God's character and God's nature. Know what I'm talking about? Deception does not reflect God's character or God's nature. I want to read a handful of scriptures together real quick. The first one is Numbers 23:19. Let's read this from the screen. God is not a man that He should lie, nor a son of man that He should repent. Has He said and He will not do it? Or has He spoken and will not make it good? I want to read another scripture together. This is Titus 1:2. Picks up in the middle of a sentence, but it's okay. In hope of eternal life, which God, who cannot lie, promised before time began. I want to read one more together real quick. This is Hebrews 6:18. Let's read this together from the screen. God did this so that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. Now, when we take all of that together, what does it tell us? It tells us that God's very nature is what? Truth. God's fundamental character is truth. He is a God of truth. He is the God who is truth. And the God who is truth created us to reflect His nature. And that means He did not create us to lie. We were not created to say things that aren't true. He didn't create the human mouth to say things that are false. He didn't create the human brain to think up false things and then go present them as if they are true. He didn't create us to deceive each other. In itself, deception, falsehood, saying things that aren't true, contradicts the design of the universe as God created it. When we lie, something is happening that is not part of what God originally created us for. And so here's how we want to put it. Deception is normatively wrong because it does not reflect God's character and nature. And because that is true, lying is not meant to be a normal part of our lives. Lying is not meant to be a normal part of our lives. I want to read a couple more scriptures together real quick. This is Exodus 20, verse 16, the Ten Commandments. It says, "You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor." I also want to read Ephesians 4:25. Let's read this from the screen together. "Therefore, each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body." There's a handful of things going on in these two verses. It says, because we are members of the body of Christ, the norm is we should be truthful to each other. Because we are citizens of God's kingdom together, the norm is that we should be truthful to each other. Because we are sons and daughters, brothers and sisters in God's family together, the norm is we should be truthful to each other. The norm is we should put off falsehood. The norm is that deception contradicts the fundamental truth of the God who's adopted us into His family, gathered us into His kingdom, brought us into His covenant, transplanted us as organs into His body. Weird metaphor, but we're rolling with it, right? It grates against His goodness and His glory. And because that is true, lying is not meant to be a normal part of our life. The way that most Christians, through most of history, in most places, among most churches, in most denominations, have put it is that most forms of lying are wrong most of the time, in most situations, for most reasons. You can make a drinking game out of how many times I said most in that sentence. But what that means is whatever else we may believe about this, lying is clearly not meant to be a normal part of our life. That is the biggest, most important thing I'm going to say in this whole session. Lying is not something that we are meant to normalize outside of some very unusual exceptions. But there are exceptions. We're going to get pretty weird this morning. Just get ready. Because the Bible absolutely presents some very unusual, very rare, very unlikely to happen to you, but absolutely real exceptions to the norm. Let's talk about a couple of those exceptions. Let's start with the most obvious one. This can be found in Exodus chapter 1. This is the story of the Hebrew midwives. Let's read this one together. This is longer, so we're going to get a vocal cord workout this morning. But real quick, if you're willing, let's read this together. Heads up, there's multiple pages to this. All right. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah and Puah, when you are helping the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see that the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, let her live. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive." So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became even more numerous. Let's break that down. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, started a campaign to kill every male Hebrew baby in the land. And as part of that campaign, he commanded the Hebrew midwives to be the executioners. He said, every time a Hebrew baby is born and it turns out to be a baby boy, I want you to kill the baby boy. This was a common thing that oppressive, colonizing empires like ancient Egypt would do throughout the ancient world. So Pharaoh commands Shiphrah and Puah, these Hebrew midwives, to do the dirty work. Now the midwives have a few options here. Option number one is that Shiphrah and Puah could have just said no, right? Pharaoh could have said, kill any Hebrew baby boys who are born. And they could have just said, we will not be doing that. What would have happened if Shiphrah and Puah had just said no? What would have happened is they would have been killed, and then they would have been replaced with different midwives who would say yes. And then all those Hebrew boys would have been killed as soon as they came out of the womb. But instead, what do Shiphrah and Puah do? They said, okay, we'll do it. And then they got to the first Hebrew woman who delivered a baby boy, and they just didn't do it. And then they got to the second Hebrew woman who delivered a baby boy, and they just didn't do it. And then they got to the third Hebrew woman who gave birth to a baby boy, and they just did not kill the baby boy. And then they got to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Months and months and months go by until eventually, by the time Pharaoh and the Egyptians realize what's going on, there's already an army of little Hebrew baby boys, and it's too late to quickly, easily, quietly get in there and ethnically cleanse them the way the Egyptian government planned. They literally put a spoke in the wheel of a massive ethnic cleansing attempt by the leader of the most powerful nation in the world at the time. And it started with lie number one. They said, yes, we will kill the Hebrew baby boys when they were not going to. That is quite literally what you call a lie. But something funny happens. And that is, Pharaoh asked them why so many Hebrew baby boys survived after he told them to kill them. And Shiphrah and Puah say, well, the Hebrew mothers, they give birth too quickly. way too vigorously. They don't even need an epidural. They're like Amazon women or something, right? The boys were already here before we even had a chance to get there and kill them. There was nothing we could do. Is that true? No. That is what Merriam-Webster's dictionary calls a lie. That is lie number 2. So 2 times in a row, Shiphrah and Puah lie in order to save as many babies as they can. Now, hold that in your head real quick. Let's talk about a second one. Let's talk about the second most famous lie. This is Joshua chapter 2. Let's read this passage together. This is another 2-pager. Just get ready. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab: "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, "Yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. But I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them." But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Okay. Let's break this one down. Rahab is a prostitute in Jericho. Jericho was a military fortress in the Promised Land. These Israelite scouts are from the Israelite tribe, which is a smaller, weaker tribe than the Jerichoites, with 0 combat skills that they could possibly use to win against the Jerichoites. They're from a tribe just like the tribes that those Jerichoite soldiers have laid waste to, one after another, in order to kill, burn, steal, enslave, and then take their land. So when the scouts from Israel arrive in Jericho to scout out the land, they run into Rahab the prostitute. And she says, "You guys need to hide." She hides the scouts from the Jerichoite search party that's looking for them. She says, "Hide here so they won't find you." Now, first things first. This may seem obvious, but hiding is a form of lying. If you're not literally playing hide and seek or something like that, hiding is a form of lying. It's a form of strategic deception in itself. So lie number 1 is that Rahab personally hides the scouts from the hunters. Lie number 2 is that Rahab tells the search team from Jericho that the Israelite scouts are not at her house. Lie number 3 is that Rahab tells the search team the scouts have gone to a specific other place, in a specific other direction, and if you guys hurry up, you might be able to catch them. That's 3 lies in a row. Now, there are plenty of other examples I could point to, but these are some of the most obvious. And that means that whatever else we believe, it is abundantly clear in the Word of God itself that there are exceptions to the rule when it comes to lying. God does not treat all lies in all situations, at all times, under all circumstances, for all reasons, as being morally equivalent to each other. There is a difference between telling this lie for this reason versus that lie for that reason, and on and on and on. And so the question that we need to answer is, how do we know which is which? Right? How was the lie of Shiphrah and Puah, the Hebrew midwives in Exodus 1, different from the lie you told last week when you said, "Yes, I got that work project finished. I just forgot it at home. I'll bring it tomorrow." when actually you forgot it existed and never even started it. Now you're going to have to dead sprint through it overnight so you don't get in trouble with the boss. What is the difference between the lie that Rahab told in Joshua 2 from the lie you told a couple weeks ago when your spouse asked if you remembered to pay the electric bill, when actually you've forgotten to pay it for the past 2 months? The money is in the bank. You just keep forgetting to actually mail the envelope, and for some reason you refuse to set up autopay. What's the difference? There are basically 3 ways that Christians throughout history have thought through how you can tell the difference between a morally acceptable lie and a sinful lie. Here's option number 1. Some Bible teachers and theologians through the years believe that Shiphrah and Puah, as well as Rahab and others in similar situations, were sinning when they lied. But that the Lord commends them and rewards them despite the sinfulness of those lies, because their intentions were good, because it was for a good reason. He was lenient in the way he dealt with them because they had a good reason to do it. That's option number 1. Here's option number 2. Some Bible teachers and theologians and so on throughout history have interpreted these passages to mean that people in situations like the Hebrew midwives and Rahab were put into a situation where they have what they call conflicting moral duties. They say that if you are in a position like these Hebrew midwives where your options are lie or kill some babies, you have basically been forced into a position where you have 2 conflicting moral duties that you cannot fulfill at the same time. Moral duty number 1 is tell the truth. Moral duty number 2 is protect innocent lives. So, if you are Rahab in Joshua chapter 2, you have a God-given moral duty to protect the innocent lives of the Israelite scouts from the search party there to kill them. And you have a moral duty to tell the truth to the search party when they ask if you've seen any Israelite scouts that they can kill. You have 2 conflicting moral duties. Telling the truth right now will make you unable to protect innocent lives that you're responsible for, but protecting those innocent lives will make you unable to tell the truth. And now you have to choose which of those conflicting moral duties is the most important. Which one are you going to let fall by the wayside in this moment here so that you can do the thing that is closest to righteousness, closest to goodness, closest to justice? That's the second most common way Christians have thought through this. They would say that Shiphrah and Puah, Rahab and others like that, chose to follow what they saw as the higher of the moral duty by protecting innocent lives, by breaking the lower moral duty, which was tell the truth. That is option number 2. We need to talk about option number 3, though. Option number 3 is what you could call the traditional view. This is the most common, most widespread way that Christians have interpreted this issue through the years. It says that in a situation where someone is seeking to harm or damage another person, whether that is physical harm or even murder, some other serious type of harm, whether physical or not, that person has forfeited any right to receive truthful information. Say that a person seeking to harm or kill others has forfeited the right to truthful information, and therefore it is not sinful to lie to them in order to protect innocent lives. This is the traditional view on this issue. But it's pretty nuanced. So I'm going to break this down in a couple different ways just to make it as clear as I can. The example that we see so many Christians using who hold to this option is, imagine you live in Nazi-era Germany. And imagine that as a person living in Nazi-era Germany, you've been hiding Jews in your house. And a couple of Nazi SS officers show up at your door and ask you, are you hiding any Jews in your house? We want to take them to the concentration camps so that we can eventually exterminate their entire race. You should say, no, I do not. If the Nazi officers knock on your door and they say, hey, do you have any Jews hidden in your basement? We want to take them off to the camps and exterminate them. Do you seriously think you should tell them the truth right now? Literally anything that you do, apart from lying to those SS officers, will result in the death of the Jews you've been hiding. If you say yes, but then you kill the officers so they can't take them, the Nazis are going to notice that the officers they sent to your house died, and they're going to send more. Anything at all that brings up suspicion is going to cause them to watch you more closely and everybody you know more closely, which means you won't be able to get those Jews you've been hiding anywhere else to safety. If you answer truthfully, you are killing the Jews you're hiding in your basement, period. You better lie. Saying yes to feel better about not having lied to the Nazi officers? Good Lord. I say, because of the fact that these SS officers are there to round up any Jews in your house and ship them off to death camps, they have lost any right to receive any truthful information from you. And you are absolved of any responsibility to give them truthful information. A person who's trying to harm or kill someone else has forfeited any entitlement they might have to your honesty. That is the most common interpretation of this question through the years. And probably it's not a surprise to find that this is the one I think is the most convincing. Were Shiphrah and Puah sinning when they lied to Pharaoh? No, they were not. Screw Pharaoh. Was Rahab sinning when she lied to the Jerichoite soldiers searching for the scouts to kill them? No, she was not. The Jerichoite soldiers can go die. They can go walk into the ocean. These are extreme, unusual, and frankly, very unlikely situations that called for extreme and unusual responses. These were exceptions to the norm. Those are the three main options that we've seen Christians use to interpret this issue through the years. But no matter which of those three you find the most convincing, there is one thing that they all share in common. That is that none of those options ever said that lying is just okay in general. Did you notice that? The normative calling that is placed on us as God's people in most situations is that we still need to tell the truth. So that in every non-extreme situation, we are called to tell the truth in a way that reflects the God of truth. This may be a harsh reality. I don't know. But the extreme measures that Shifra and Pua had to go to in order to protect a bunch of babies from being murdered are probably not a justification for us to lie out of convenience today because we forgot to do our homework last night. The really extreme measures Rahab had to go to in order to save the lives of the Israelite scouts are probably not a justification for us to lie for convenience today in order to avoid hassle. That's the big one for me. I don't know about you. But the way that a lot of heroic Europeans in the Nazi era had to lie in order to save the lives of the Jews they were hiding behind their bookcase is probably not a justification for us to lie today in ways that are meant to make us look better to others and so on and so forth. No matter what specific interpretation we hold on this issue, the fact that remains in all of them is that we are not meant to normalize deception under any kind of normal circumstances. We are meant to be a people of truth, even when our habit of truth is inconvenient or costly. You know what I'm talking about? We're meant to be a people of truth who reflect the God of truth to the point that we maybe sometimes lose out on opportunities because we tell the truth. Ever noticed how lying is better for business than truthing? Ever noticed how lying is often better for your career than truthing? A lot of times as a pastor, lying will be better for the human side of your ministry than truthing. You can probably build a bigger church a whole lot quicker if you lie a whole lot more. Know what I'm talking about? Sometimes other people will come out looking better than us in the public square because they are willing to distort the truth for their own gain in ways that we are not willing to. Sometimes we'll find ourselves financially behind some of our family members or our friends or our neighbors because we are not willing to distort the truth to enrich ourselves in the same way that they are. And on and on and on. And I'm going to be super honest. The disadvantages that honesty will bring us may or may not ever turn around in our favor during this lifetime. Know what I'm talking about? I hear a lot of people, a lot of preachers and so on and so forth say, if you just be honest, eventually you'll come out on top. Ever heard that? Eventually those people fudging the numbers are going to get caught and you're going to take their place. Eventually those politicians who were lying will get busted and everybody will realize you were the one they should have listened to all along. Eventually everybody will realize those family members who've been dragging you through the mud for years were full of it, and they're going to come back around and see that you're the one who was right. That might happen or it might not. I pray that it does. I cannot promise that it will. Because the reality is that there is no guaranteed earthly reward for being honest. Here's the reward for being honest. The reward for being honest, even when it's costly or inconvenient, is that you get to be a Christ-reflectingly honest person. That's the reward. The reward for being truthful, even when it's costly, is that you get to be a person who reflects the truthfulness of your Creator. And yet, there's a very strange thing that happens. And that is that as we grow in our walk with the Lord, that gradually starts to be enough. Getting to be what we were called to be becomes the source of our joy. That is all the time that we're going to have for today. But we are not done tackling your questions together. Because next month, on the fourth Sunday of the month, we're going to continue tackling all your toughest spiritual questions. Actually, it's going to be the third Sunday. Never mind. That was my bad. Next month, on the third Sunday of the month, we're going to continue tackling all your toughest questions about God, the Bible, and Christianity. We're going to tackle our questions here at 10 in the sanctuary and then talk about what we just heard together at 11. So keep sending in your questions so we can work through all of them together as the months go by. And if you are ready to do that, if you are ready to take the next step this morning, then we invite you to do one of three things. As we sing together in just a moment, if there is something the Lord is calling you to do, we invite you to come down to the front and pray with me. Or stay after the service. Come find me here in the sanctuary and talk through what the Lord is calling you to with me. Or scan that QR code. Send me a message and start a conversation. Whatever it is, if the Lord is drawing you to something this morning, we want to talk through it together and begin taking those next steps. So let's worship the Lord through song together. Please stand with me as we sing, and the altar is open.